Rupert, welcome to
Hello, Andrew.
welcome to 3 Seconds Ahead. It's great to be with you, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. For those of you who don't know you, what I know is I've known Rupert for a very long time. He's been a great friend, a great advisor. His profession is in the finance world, helping people out with their money. But he's more than that. He's a father. He's a businessman. And I've known him to be a really deep thinker and someone who cares deeply. And that's what I'd like to explore today, but we may go into other areas. So Rube, really, thanks for being here. And I think the first question is, for me, is where did your story begin? Where does the Rupert Smith story begin? And you can start anywhere.
I'm sure, and I'm aware that it began 50 odd years ago.
Yeah.
That's apparently where my awareness in this dynamic began. And I'm often accused of being a man of not many words, but I think I've answered your question.
Okay, so it began at the beginning. Great stuff. Any particular experiences that stand out in those 53 years since the beginning?
Yeah, so I think the way I'd answer that question is I say that I look forward to every day. Although I don't recall it, I am often reminded by my mother that I was one of four, being the eldest, who she often remarks was that I would, I'm sure that I was naughty and I'm sure that I made a lot of noise, but I was the one who used to sit and observe. Mm-hmm. And I think that probably stands out for me as an observation with regard to me, because I learned at a very young age that what's most important is that you have one hole for making a noise out of, although I suppose it could be more.
Yeah.
But,
it could be more.
But you have one hole to talk and 2 ears to listen. So I think in that respect, what's important is that sorry, not a good start.
It's lovely. It's a good laugh. I think nothing wrong with starting with a good laugh. But yeah, that's so what you're saying is something that rings true for me, because it's what my father used to say to me, which was 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. And
exactly.
And what's interesting for me is reflecting on when you were a youngster and your mom telling you that you were the observer. And yes, I agree. I'm pretty sure you were naughty, but generally you spent your time observing, which I think is a wonderful skill to have. And do you think that's still true for you today?
Yeah, so I think that I probably engage a lot more than I used to, or I'd like to think that I do. I think what's important is if you can utilize what you do observe in a positive way, and use that to understand the environment that you're in, use that to understand what the people who share the environment may be experiencing at that point. And those aspects of it allow one to engage or communicate on multiple levels.
Yeah. So being able to use what's around you in a positive way to largely for the benefit of everybody is what I'm hearing you say. Okay, Rup, I mean, taking that into mind, and it's kind of why we're having this conversation, is that over these 36 days, I think it is now, that we've been in lockdown, we had a conversation the other day where I said, the one thing that really stands out for me in this craziness of uncertainty is the fact that what we can be certain of is that in some way or another, we'll all be beginning again in various aspects of our life. Could be business, family, your job, or whatever. And I think that skill of observation in this particular time, being able to see the situation for what it is rather than what you want it to be, is really, really powerful. So my question to you is, what observations do you have of the current circumstance, and what do you think you've learned from it?
Some observations of our current circumstances are is that it's a framework which we've embarked on with the objective of not only preserving ourselves but looking after everybody else around us as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think I wouldn't say that's a learning for me. I think that's the way that I've always tried to observe my life, and that is, and used to observe in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's very important to be aware of the people around you, to be aware of the fact that you don't always understand why they behave the way that they do,
Mm-hmm.
and you can choose to fight the framework that we're in at this point,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably not going to help you in your endeavors to achieve whatever you want to, or you can embrace it and accept that there are certain limitations from what we've been used to, and use what you do have in front of you. I suppose that a lot of people use the analogy of glass half full.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's nothing you can do to change the circumstances that we are in. We need to accept what they are and deal with whatever we have to deal with whatever is left to deal with those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, the circumstance of the circumstance is what you're saying, and really, at the end of the day,
Is what it is.
Yeah, and one has to manage your own attitude towards it. Is what I'm getting from you now. That, and I think it's true for most people, is easier said than done. Okay, I certainly have spent a lot of time in the world of introspecting, of trying to understand myself, and one of the things I find difficult is just to accept things that they are, and I've tended to fight my way through life, which is quite exhausting. What you have said to me is that very early on in your life that you realized that was futile. So in the time that you've gone through, what tools or techniques have you developed or even adopted that has helped you be more mindful of the environment and the people around you? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Okay, so let me just make an observation of what you said there, and that is that because it is what it is, it's not to say that it is just, and not to say that the way you perceive it is the only way that it could be perceived. So an approach to difficult situations, instead of observing them as a limitation, could be observed as a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And an analysis of the situation before you actually choose to deal with it is often provides a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because whatever your experience would have been of life, that may or may not have molded how you perceive a situation that you come across, and certainly in the fast-paced world that we live in, there is this need, or there's a need I often find with people, is that I need to deal with this right now, and that's often not what has to be done. If you can sit and reflect on something that may have blindsided you or may have happened, often there's no rush to deal with it straight away. When people speak about the vital signs, unless it's a vital sign, you're still alive, you're still breathing, and there are lots of people who share the this stone in the galaxy with you,
Mm-hmm.
and they're probably facing challenges which are far greater than whatever that might be. So it's put into perspective is the first step. I think from there, really, it's ensuring that you have a framework against which you can judge. And when I say judge or assess whether what you plan to do in order to deal with that challenge is going to be fair to everybody else who's concerned. And then the most important thing is checking that the way you see it is the way that everybody else sees it before you decide to deal with it or implement whatever you plan to do in order to deal with that challenge.
Okay, and the last step, actually taking action, is
and based on that, taking action. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Rup. I mean, there is a hell of a lot there, and I loved the way that you summed up the challenge, analysis, reflection, and pause. I really like that, because you're right. There is this tendency in the world we live in today that the quicker you get things done, the better, rather than being able to reflect and doing something of quality that's lasting and that has a positive effect again on yourself and other people around you. So that idea of pause, and everybody's in such a rush and tend to forget that, is, I'm glad that you raised it, because it's something that could help me and reminded me of how important it is. But then there's the idea of perspective that you spoke about. So put things into perspective through pause and analysis and reflection. And then you mentioned, then go on to the framework, which is, I suppose, another word for strategy. And it sounds to me, and I stand corrected, that you have a framework, a template that you step back into in times of challenge and struggle. Do you have a framework, and could you share it with me?
So regardless of how you choose to conduct your life, and that may be affected by the religion you choose, the circumstances that you're in, whatever they are, there are a couple of universal truths.
Mm-hmm.
And those universal truths I label values.
Mm-hmm.
I have 8 simple values that I try and apply to my life every day, and those being love, courage, health, honesty, trust, integrity, personal development, and growth.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my framework, if I can call it.
Mm-hmm.
And in trying to ensure that I do the best that I can for myself,
mm-hmm.
and that I can do for those around me, that is sort of, well, it's not sort of, it is my framework.
Okay. So, and that particular framework, that list of 8 values, why? I mean, how did you choose those?
So I believe that those are something that are in me in terms of an energy.
Mm-hmm.
I did undergo a process, a workshop that I allowed me to confirm that, and I think more than once in this discussion that I've had with you,
mm-hmm.
I think throughout your life there's an aspect of all of us which we need, and importantly, one of mine being trust. It's very important that you trust that inner voice that you hear from time to time,
mm-hmm.
Which actually says to you, if you question your trust, it's a case of saying, well, let's look for confirmation. That confirmation needs to have an aspect of rationality to it. So it's not to say that I heard a stone talk to me, or
mm-hmm.
A flower spoke to me. There is a all of us have another voice inside ourselves, or people call it gut instinct, whatever it is, and it's learning to trust yourself in that respect.
Okay, that's really, really powerful. I'm in the process of reading a good book called The Power of the Subconscious Mind, which really resonates with me when you talk about that. But that aspect of trusting oneself, is that something that you've always done, or did you one day have an epiphany where you thought, wow, Rupert, you need to trust yourself? Is being the observer? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what I didn't communicate there appropriately or firmly enough is that everybody has doubts. We all have doubts every day. We all have things where we question. And if you give yourself the space to actually go and think about it, you will have moments in your life where you go through a process, or you have an experience where you get that confirmation that you may have been told you're wrong all your life. It's not to say that those beliefs don't exist within you. And if you open yourself to that you may not always be right, you accept that and you also accept that you are willing to be wrong. It's not to say in a very it's difficult to say. So what I'm trying to say is that as in nature you have positive and negative. We speak about right and wrong, the yin and yang. There's always got to be a balance, and that balance, in that sense, is that there always needs to be a counter. And if you can live with the fact that there's certain aspects that you may not find attractive, or you may be uncomfortable with, the balance to that, or you'll always find a balance to balance that out.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that you actually, in order to grow as an individual, in order to develop, you actually need challenge. You need to have yin and yang. You need to have the good times and the bad. Otherwise, life could get boring, either completely overwhelming if you've only got chaos, or boring if you've only got order.
Assuming that you're somebody who wants to challenge the status quo, there are people who can get through life by accepting the situation that they're in, and that in itself is a challenge too. So they may not want to challenge. They may not want to challenge those limitations.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that doing nothing is also doing something, and that can also be difficult.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Rupert, I've really enjoyed our conversation so far, and I'd like to just ask you one more thing, and then see where it takes us. Is that if you, out of these particular 35 or 36 days it is that we've been in, what are you going to take with you, and what are you going to leave behind, and why? So what lessons or reflections on the last 36 days will you take with you, and what would you leave behind?
So what springs to mind immediately is that more reminders. So going back to what we were speaking about earlier, and that is, you question how you're challenging the limitations in your life constantly, or I do. This format in which we're having this discussion, I certainly find quite challenging. In fact, quite exhausting, on the basis that I would rather engage with people firsthand. I think what that is going to do to me, though, is I'm probably going to be a lot more selective about the the time that I do, people that I choose to spend time with, in the sense that I think that certainly for the next 12 or 18 months, this is going to be the format that we have to communicate within. And it will probably reinforce exactly what I've said to you there, and that is that we have limited time for our experience of this dimension in this lifetime. And what's important is that you, and given that you don't really know what the parameters are on that limited lifetime, it's really important that one takes responsibility for whatever that time is and utilize that time to really get the best out of it. You come here in less than underpants and you leave here in less than underpants. So that's the reality. All you will have is your memories and your experiences.
Yeah, it's what's sort of springing into my head when you're speaking. What I'm hearing you say is that this life that we have, this limited life that we have, I mean, it's a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of things, is such a wonderful opportunity. But with all opportunity comes great responsibility. And are you going to take responsibility for this amazing opportunity that you have? And the last 30 days, and thank you for being open about how difficult and challenging you find being on this platform. And I'm grateful that you're doing this with me. You need to embrace each opportunity within the opportunity, whether you like it or not.
Whether you're comfortable or not.
Yeah.
Like and unlike are just balanced. Yeah.
Okay, I like that. So whether you're comfortable or not. I mean, Rupert, I think this is a good place for us to start winding things up. So I'll ask you, is there anything else that comes to mind that you'd like to share, or just a short message to those who will be listening to us, the rest of the audience, that you'd like to just give to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I was trying to put across there is that embrace the fact that this is your experience. Only you will have this experience from the first memory that you have of your lifetime to the last, and have the courage to take responsibility for however you've dealt with things, whether they were dealt with and inspired other people, or whether you were shunned for it. You can't live your life regretting what you've done or feeling guilty about what you've done, because those things are energy sapping, and they shut down the joy and the joy that you can have.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rup. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to having another chat with you.